Okay, the broadcast is live. Welcome everyone to this Facebook Live on thriving with invisible illness. Usually you don't think of the word thriving when you think of illness, so that's what we're here to talk about today. How could this possibly be? How could you thrive with an invisible illness? I am the Director of Social Impact at the Mighty. I work mostly with nonprofit partners to bring resources, advocates, and experts to our community. And another part of my job is sharing stories from the Mighty community to new audiences to break down stigma, raise awareness, and just help people feel less alone. So today I am moderating this panel. I myself have lived with ulcerative colitis for most of my life since I was 6 years old. And I brought with me two excellent advocates, Caitlyn Smith and Manda Barger, who I'm going to let introduce themselves. So without further ado, Caitlyn, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here advocating for IBD awareness. Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis is definitely a passion of mine. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis when I was 14 years old, so 2001. It's almost 20 years ago now. So I am a contributing editor at the Mighty. I found the Mighty because of colitis. I was looking for a community platform, so I'm also really excited to be here on behalf of the Mighty. And I've been fortunate enough in my journey with colitis that my symptoms and my overall disease has been pretty well managed. So I'm excited to hear more from Manda about her journey and to offer my tips about thriving with IBD and anything else that I can do to help the community.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and my name is Manda Barger. I was diagnosed first with UC in 2013, but later later I was re-diagnosed with moderate Crohn's in 2018 after I had my son. IBD runs a lot in my family. Both my dad and my aunt have ulcerative colitis, and my mom and my grandfather had Crohn's. So when symptoms started back in my early 20s, I knew that there was probably something that needs to be handled there. In that process, I was able to stumble upon Girls with Guts, where I'm now the secretary, where we're advocating for women with either IBD and or an ostomy, trying to take away the taboo of women in bathroom talk.
I love it. Thank you, Manda. So let's start with the basics here. What does it mean to thrive to you when we say thriving with invisible illness?
To me, thriving with invisible illness, any invisible illness, including IBD, means being your own advocate. And I think that that can take a lot of different forms, whether it's in the doctor's office, whether it's with your family, whether it's with your friends, whether it's in the workplace. I think being your own advocate can definitely help you thrive with your disease, and just having body awareness of what you can and cannot handle and what you need and you don't need on any given day. And I think on the flip side too, thriving is also means being okay not thriving, and kind of like the general thing of what we think thriving means. It's like you have to be out there doing all these things, and that's not what I think of when I think of thriving. Sometimes thriving is letting yourself wake up, roll over, and go back to sleep instead of getting up for the day. Or sometimes thriving is getting up and watching your favorite TV show, or sometimes it's skipping your workout. So I think it's just having that gentleness with yourself can also be thriving with your disease, and just kind of putting yourself first.
Yes.
I think thriving can mean a few different things depending on, we used a word earlier, and that is grace. And that is giving yourself the grace of seeing that even just surviving in itself can be thriving with IBD. Sometimes we have to change our goals, but we can find new types of goals and new dreams, and have the grace of when we have to take some extra time away. I, for one, had to change my career when I started having more severe flares, and my job was not letting me get back into remission. And finding, I guess, what's more important to us. And for me, it was my health and the time that I could have with my family. And having my health at risk for a longer time, that just wasn't worth it.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think for so long, I thought I had to do it all just because I was always so used to giving everything in my life, my all, my relationships, schoolwork, anything related to my career, all at the same time. I really just didn't know how to take breaks and check in as well with my doctor. And, you know, a decade into my disease really just let things get out of hand. And I think knowing that you don't have to be a superwoman or superman and do it all actually allows you to focus on the things that matter with you, and really just putting yourself first, I believe is thriving, because you can't do anything to help others or your other dreams if you're not putting your health first. So thanks for those answers. I do want to quickly say, inflammatory bowel disease has a lot of misconceptions, and the definition could be very, very confusing. So what do you say to friends or family who don't really know about IBD, or a stranger you meet that wants to know what IBD is? What do you typically tell them?
When I'm first having those conversations with people, one thing that I actually do notice is probably 90% of the time when I tell someone I have ulcerative colitis, they know someone who also has it, or they have it themselves. So I think maybe a common misconception, not a misconception, but maybe something that we don't realize, is there's a lot more people out there with inflammatory bowel disease than we do realize. So I think that is just becoming more and more apparent the more I just talk about this in my own communities. But for someone who doesn't know what it is, when I usually lead with Crohn's, that just to me tends to be the disease that they're more familiar with, and they link it to bathroom disease. So I kind of explain, it's a little bit more than that. Yes, those are the most common symptoms and the most familiar symptoms to the general public, but can also come with inflammation in other areas of the body, or it comes with mental health struggles or fatigue, which is not a bathroom symptom necessarily. But I generally kind of run through a basic symptom and how it manifests in myself. And then I usually ask them if they have like any specific questions about it.
I think that's a really good point. Just asking what kind of questions they have about it. We do know that it does take an actual physical difference on the gut. And especially now that we're learning more specifically in the Crohn's area, that it is more than just the internal lining of the gut, but it can actually go deeper into that. And as Caitlyn was saying, it can also manifest in your joints, or again, fatigue for either. I think too, along with the bathroom, also I think you also have to mention a little bit of the mental health aspect of if you're having that conversation, of course, depending on how deep of a relationship you have. As you said, with a stranger, maybe not so much, but with family and friends, kind of saying that it really affects your body as a whole.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So because it's an invisible illness most of the time, I mean, there are certain ways you could notice the disease, mainly if you are taking maybe medicine that shows, when you take prednisone or things like that, but it's mostly an invisible illness. So I'm wondering if you've ever faced any stigma or confusion with living with an invisible illness and the other people in your life, whether it be work or things like that.
When I think of stigma, I think more of, the stigma that I put on myself over the years, and how that's changed as I've just gotten older and as I've gotten more familiar with my own body and more familiar with my needs, just as an adult woman, not necessarily with Crohn's or colitis. So I think just stripping down those preconceived notions I put on myself, a lot of it for me personally is tied to body image. And that has been a long struggle for me that started in high school. I was a competitive runner, and there's all sorts of body image struggles that come within the running community. And then tied to colitis, I think I was just really confused for a really long time about what my body could and could not do, what it should be able to do, what it should look like, all these types of things. And then you throw in being a woman, and there's all sorts of societal pressures on us as well to look a certain way or act a certain way. So I think that was mostly the stigmas I felt were just placed upon myself. And I'm 33 now, and I'm still unraveling those, especially when it comes to self-confidence and mental health. That's an ongoing daily adventure for me. I don't want to say struggle, because I think I've gotten a lot healthier in that area, but it's a day-to-day thing for me.
Thanks for that.
I think, as you're kind of saying too, that there's a little bit of just beyond just the symptoms that, yes, especially when I was on a steroid, There are probably a lot more people who thought about my weight gain than actually told me. I guess they were being graceful in that aspect. Of course, you look at photos back when you have moon face and kind of wonder what was happening. But whether it was me having to take a half a day off of work to go get an infusion, or then when it came to making several runs to the bathroom, I actually had a coworker starting to notice that I was heading to a certain part of the building more often. But especially in the line of being a working woman with IBD. And then when I started getting worse of it actually being Crohn's, of that flare, it was a lot more of being a young working mom. I just had a kid. I was already still dealing with some confidence issues of trying to prove myself in the workplace. I just received a managerial role, so even more so. So some of that stigma was even just in my own head of that, am I really sick enough that I should be calling off of work? Or, oh, geez, what will my boss think of me if I continually ask for half a day every 8 weeks? And then you also, and you start worrying about the legal system of it, much less the work ethic, because I think there's also just this added pressure in general that of having an invisible illness, you don't look sick and you don't want to give away that you're sick.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance, I would say, for sure. Before we move to the positive side of when did you get more validation and support than some of these instances that we face with invisible illness, I did want to acknowledge a question that came in from Karen. It's a question that we didn't plan ahead of time, so I'm not sure what the answers will touch on, but it's, does this require a change in diet? So I would say that everyone's answer would be different because a lot of people with IBD have other food sensitivities, so lactose intolerance or things like that. It is not a disease like celiac disease where you're actually allergic to gluten, but I myself have never been able to find a commonality in foods that make me sensitive. I've had Eastern and Western medicine allergy tests. A couple things came up, like being allergic to sesame, but nothing really significant enough. I would say when I would be in a flare-up, I would definitely alter my diet so that my intestines had as much time to rest as possible. But I'm kind of different in that I feel like I can't tie my symptoms to any specific food related things, but there is a lot out there. Some people say the low FODMAP diet or the simple carbohydrate diet. I'm really curious, Manda and Caitlyn, what you've encountered, what's helped and not, or how significant diet has been for you.
I think that's something we need to think about in treatment in general, is that it has to be personalized. We're now even seeing, even with just medical treatment, that people react to things differently. Some people react to Entyvio. I reacted to Remicade. Some people have an allergy to Humira. And that also comes along the food line. I personally really haven't had any good or bad when it comes to food, but I know a lot of girls in our group that do. We have a lot of ostomates who I know sometimes will actually have issues digesting their food depending on if it was too meaty or had too much fiber. As you were kind of saying, Angelica, during a flare, I would definitely go on a low fiber diet to give that colon some rest. But that's about as far as it went for my personal journey of finding out what my triggers were. Stress was so much of my trigger. I was just about to say stressors. That was much more of a fact of what affected me more than diet.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you both said already. I think that it's so personalized, just like you said, Manda, about medication. You know, the medications I've been on and off and on again haven't worked for my friends, and sometimes they do work for my friends. I think the treatment plan from diet to medication to exercise to whatever else that you're working on with your doctor needs to be customized and personalized. And sometimes it can take time to figure out what will work for you. For me personally, the only food that I absolutely 100% cannot eat is popcorn. Mm-hmm. I've heard that a lot, but I have friends that totally can tolerate popcorn. But for me, that's the one thing I absolutely cannot eat. And other than that, I just try to limit a lot of things. Like I don't eat a lot of red meat. I don't eat a lot of gluten, although I do cheat here and there. I just love bread.
Fair. That's fair.
Yeah, and I stay away from soda. I recently cut alcohol out for the most part from my diet, just things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mary Ellen says that I believe she's just saying that IBS is common, and that's for sure. Irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, sometimes is confused with IBD, inflammatory bowel disease. IBD is autoimmune and more not understood because anything autoimmune has a lot of complicated factors causing it, you know, a mix of things that we don't fully understand. Same with the treatment, like Manda was saying, there is, you know, so many different treatments and that some really work for people and not others. Whereas IBS tends to be when you have just symptoms in your stomach really easily triggered by like foods or stress or things like that, and it's not autoimmune, and yes, it is way more common. So thanks for that, Mary Ellen. Okay, I think that's all the comments we have for now. So I'm going to jump back in on the flip side of the whole not being understood because you have an invisible illness. Could you talk about who are some of those key players in your support team that really do understand or validate your journey with IBD?
I think my family was always kind of they were the first primary and the major coach still in my life. Between my husband and my parents with their own battles with IBD, they were the ones who really pushed me to continue to keep asking questions, because that's what we're having to see. We have to be our own advocates. And sometimes I would get too tired to fight. But having my husband there encouraging me, saying, no, we need to take this to Vanderbilt. Or my parents saying, have you looked at this clinic? Or why did your doctor say that? And then, of course, too, Girls with Guts was a place that I found when I was at some of my darkest moments. And that was when I was in the most severe flare. And it just was not going away. I was in a rural area, so I did not really even understand what to do or where to go. I had a general GI. And they just kept throwing a type of treatment that wasn't happening. And that, unfortunately, is a story that we hear among a lot of our girls. And so finding certain groups, finding that team that can cheer you on is exactly what you need to get to try to get you to that next level, because everybody deserves to have a good treatment plan and a doctor that listens.
Yes.
100%. I totally agree with you, Amanda. I think having a good doctor has to be at one of the people at the top of that list of your people that are going to advocate for you and the people that are in your corner. I have as well heard of a lot of stories of friends being bounced around between gastroenterologists or primary care physicians that either don't know that they're dealing with IBD or they don't want to make that plunge yet. Or, you know, sometimes honestly, I've heard that people think that other people are being dramatic when they come in with their symptoms. And that's really disheartening to hear. But for me specifically, I've been fortunate that I've had the greatest GIs along my journey. And I'm so grateful for them, particularly in San Diego here at Scripps. They have such a great team. They've always encouraged me and worked with me. And I have pushed back on some of their recommendations, and they work with me on that because I know what my body wants and needs, and I know what it doesn't. But outside of doctors, I really have to shout out Team Challenge of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. I have met my best friends in the whole wide world through that program. And without that program, I honestly wouldn't know anyone else with this disease. And they have just totally changed my life. And I'll never forget when I found out about them at a symposium when I was a teenager, freshly out of a flare in college. And I didn't know what I was dealing with at the time. I just thought, like, I just take some pills and I'd be fine. And then I got sick. So I was really seeking more information, and I found that program. And since then, I've just met the most incredible people in the entire world. And some of them have Crohn's, some of them have family members with Crohn's, some of them don't know anyone and they just wanted to fundraise, and then they met everybody with Crohn's and colitis. I can't say enough about having people in your circle that also deal with IBD is huge. They just get it in a way that other people can't get it. And I think just my best friends who I didn't meet through Team Challenge have been there for me the whole way. They've been super supportive. And then, of course, my family. I mean, when I first was diagnosed, I was 14. I couldn't deal with this. I didn't know what was going on. I mean, shout out to my mom who was cleaning up after me, honestly, and my sisters for bringing magazines home to me when I was sick. My family has just been there. I think having that support system is really important.
So important. Jack, we will get you that program and also some other programs. I know Manda feels very strongly about her support squad. So Manda, do you want to get into that a little bit? Although Jack, you'll definitely appreciate the one link. This one is a little women focused that Manda will chat about.
Yeah, of course, we have all love and appreciation for all ostomates and everyone on their IBD path. But the group that I'm most associated with is Girls with Guts, because there is a slight more of a stigma for women talking about bathroom issues. That's not to say men don't. I think there's unique challenges for each one, but especially to the point that Caitlyn was making, having some friends with IBD who really get it. Like I said, having some of those darkest moments in my flare before finding Girls with Guts, and then finally stumbling upon this thread where other girls were talking about having accidents. Other girls were talking about products that they used to try to find relief, or having heating pads, or being able to actually make some bathroom jokes and not feel embarrassed about it. Finding a safe place to talk about that. And of course, that is for us with Girls with Guts, as we have a few thousand girls in our private but very active Facebook forum. But I know that the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation even have some small groups. I think there's also even some like regional chapters out there. But absolutely, to Caitlyn's point of being able to talk to someone who you can really relate to, because even in my family, there wasn't too much that my parents could share with me. My mom's Crohn's isn't severe as mine, and my dad's ulcerative colitis, the majority of his symptoms were back in the 70s before he had a before he had an ostomy, sorry. But yeah, finding that support, that not just the support, but also being able to learn from each other's experiences, really.
Yeah, that's so key. I also did want to mention the Mighty has launched a Crohn's and colitis support group. It's very new, so you could be one of the first members. I am also part of it, so you could probably see me on there because I tend to post a lot, even though it's still very new. So Jack, among the CCFA, that's a resource. And thank you so much for sharing that about Girls with Guts. I love the sisterhood that I've seen through the years. So it's been really valuable for so many women. Okay.
Can I just add one more thing? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to be conscientious of people out there who might be dealing with this, who unfortunately might not have the support of family or friends. So I just wanted to reiterate, like, there's so many resources out there to meet people that have this disease. And Manda was absolutely right. Crohn's and Colitis Foundation has a lot of chapters. There's probably one in your area, hopefully, where you can, join a support group or learn more about Team Challenge or just connect with the foundation. And then also Girls with Guts, like, they have a awesome Instagram page if you're a social media user. So I just wanted to reiterate that importance. Even if you don't have that immediate support, there is support out there.
Yes.
And also too, just to the physical aspect, sorry, that we keep expanding on this, but this is the one time that I think we can really say that social media has helped, because it is allowing so many of us to connect where we wouldn't have been able to connect before. Like with the Girls with Guts, we have so many from different states. We have people in Philadelphia. We have women in Colorado, in California, Georgia. And we even have a couple in Canada. And we wouldn't have been able to meet without having social media. And as our group first started kind of as a blogging group, we've been able to expand that to so much more of offering programs like our offering of supplies for people with post-surgery ostomies, or just now getting infusion kits, and being able to build that sisterhood. It's strange that you can build such a deep found relationship online. I know how bizarre that sounds, but it's absolutely right. Because while we do have our annual retreat, we're even doing it virtual this time, because the virtualness and being able to connect digital to the digital world has become a crucial asset.
Yes, now with COVID more than ever, a lot of people are still really needing those virtual summit options. So on the end of like hobbies and activities, what has helped you with managing your disease, like the stress of it and all of those sort of things?
For me, I mentioned before, I'm a big runner. I've run since high school. So to me, running has definitely been a consistent stress reliever for me. And I firmly believe that exercise is a really important part of managing any sort of chronic illness, particularly IBD. Because, I don't know if you've heard of the runner trots, but it does help you stay a little bit regular if you have a regular running routine too. So that's been really helpful for me, and Team Challenge is an endurance training program. So it was nice to find that and be able to run and combine fundraising as well. Swimming is another great one for me. I love endurance, and swimming's obviously little to no impact. So that's good on days where I can't really handle the impact, or I have a stomach issue or whatever is going on. I also like journaling a lot. I've brought that in as a regular practice this year. I journal every single day. Sometimes it's a line, sometimes it's a page, sometimes it's just like a happy face when I don't have anything else to say, but just having a space to write down whatever I'm feeling in that moment is really good. I have a really tight network of friends, close friends that I reach out to on a regular basis, but I think right now the biggest thing for me is just focusing on myself and taking that time for myself. I just started a new job, and I do work on the side for the Mighty too. So I make sure to get that time for myself and not let stress get too overwhelming.
Yes, boundary setting. We will have to get into that after. But Manda, any particular activities and hobbies that have helped you?
So it's a little bit hard with a toddler, but I find a lot of therapy when it comes to artwork. Journaling has definitely been a big thing for me. Previously, I used to be able to paint a little bit more or knit. And I know we take that artistic flair again to our Girls with Guts retreats, where we're recently doing this kind of artwork where you actually break a pot and then glue it together with golden glitter. And just the process of, first off, being able to just yell and break apart a pot with all whatever anger you had pent up from your IBD. There were so many of us just yelling, just like colon, like just everything. But then the beauty of this artwork is that with that gold, you're actually highlighting those cracks, you're highlighting those holes, showing that this pot is so unique and beautiful, more than it was when it was first put together. And that's just an example of some of the artwork that I think people, especially in our group, have found of that it's more than just art, but you can also put a lot of emotion into it. And I think having that, as what Caitlyn was saying, with having certain groups of friends, also focusing on your own health, I think those crafts kind of help focus that energy. I myself, with the job I started a couple months ago, it's hard to remind myself to step away from work, or even as a mom, because it is so healthy to step away and focus on something as silly as painting.
Yes, that goes into the whole boundary setting side of things. I would say that boundary setting has helped me immensely. I know we've touched on it before, Caitlyn and Manda, but we both said that we all said we like to please people, do a lot of things and be involved in so much. But saying no, we were talking about this the other day, is really healthy. I forget, Manda or Caitlyn, if you had a quote about that, that I would love to hear again.
I think that was me. I said no is a complete sentence, and I live by that all year. That's been like my mantra, because I do identify as a recovering people pleaser, and it's very difficult to take a step back and stop checking in with everyone else before yourself. So I just always remind myself that no is a complete sentence, and I think boundaries are so important. I have the most loving, supportive partner in my life, and my husband has very good boundaries, so I'm so grateful for him for constantly teaching me how to set those better for myself in my life.
Yeah, Caitlyn has done a lot better in being able to set those boundaries and say no, because I'm still trying to work myself there. But almost to your point, though, now that I'm kind of thinking about it, it is also finding that support group that might help you say no to something. Because sure enough, yes, it's my husband who says, do you really think we need to add all of that to the weekend? Or even I just now have a good coworker saying, I know you said you are a person who's going to jump on this. You do not need to jump on it. You have enough on your plate.
It's good.
But yes, It's something I think all of us are working really hard to get to. And it's definitely something that's going to be a lot easier for me to preach than do. I catch myself in that a lot of times, that I need to follow my own advice.
Yes.
But you're not, I think the biggest thing is you're not being selfish by making boundaries.
Yes.
You deserve those boundaries.
Love that. I would agree with all of that, 100%. So Mary Ellen, your dietitian told you about a book about eating for IBS, which is probably helpful. Like I was saying earlier, IBS and IBD are different, although a lot of people with the autoimmune disease IBD also have IBS. IBS, there's a lot of sensitivities with food or things like that. Again, none of us are experts or doctors here, but I would be curious if that book was helpful. And you also said you got shamed for using toilet paper during COVID, which is a real thing. That was obviously a big issue. There was a shortage for a while, but you know, people that have conditions where they need the toilet paper, and that, yeah, I can't imagine. Anyone have any good products that they've, like, that we didn't talk about this as a question ahead of time, but just like little things you could put in your toolkit, say if you're traveling or things like that, that could just help things?
Yeah, actually I think it was about a year ago, we actually did kind of a group message on the Mighty about having a just in case.
Yes.
And mine came up with, I was able to during like a doctor hospital visit, I snagged away like one of the little vomit bag pack things. So I had like one of those for nausea. I had a extra pair of like underwear, gloves, even a baggie in case, you know, for some of the worst types of accidents. Some of the nicer, you know, when it comes to actual products, we're a big fan of Poopery. It's some really great stuff to, you know, clear out some odors from the bathroom. And a big thing that we've really enjoyed, I shouldn't say enjoyed, but a big benefit that we've had, no matter if you have an ostomy or not, is columpospine, which I know a lot of ostomates use for their ostomy, but even when you still have your entire colon and you're having to prep for a scope is vital and very helpful.
I don't know about that. That's interesting. I'll have to talk to you after about that. So yes, Jack was wondering about natural foods to manage the colon. I would say that it just comes down to what we were saying earlier about it being so personalized for some people about what foods are helpful and not helpful. So I couldn't speak too generally to that. I know there is a lot of confusion when it comes to people that support probiotics or say it's not necessary. So that's always been super confusing. I love my GI doctor now at Mount Sinai. We don't get into too much of the other side of those side of things, but I have had some GI doctors in the past talk about the probiotics or certain like turmeric and things like that, although nothing was consistently making a difference hugely one way or the other. So I don't know if either of you take supplements or any more natural things, but for me, I'm currently not focusing on any specific foods or herbs or anything.
Yeah, I've definitely used probiotics in the past. I'm not currently taking any, but I have definitely, at the recommendation of my gastroenterologist, which I just want to say, if you get recommendations for probiotics or supplements or food, like please talk to your doctor first. As Angelica said, we're not doctors, but I found success for me personally in using probiotics here and there. And then one thing I constantly get asked and I hear and is always a discussion is fiber. And one thing that I've learned is that I do have to be careful with the fiber intake in my own diet. And I think it's just kind of confusing because you hear that a good amount of fiber in your diet helps you stay regular, but then with the inflammation of something like IBD, it can actually have the reverse effect for me personally, and I can get kind of constipated. So that's always something that I'm leery of, because a lot of people say, oh, you should just eat more fiber, and that's not an approach that works for me. I have to be very careful there. So I just say work with your doctor. Unfortunately, diet is something that has to be trial and error for a lot of people, but that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, and I have heard that people that change their diet significantly and are following something that you often have to be on it for a couple months to really, you have to stick to it. So that was always a challenge with me. I have tried all different sorts of diets, but then, you really have to stick to it strictly for a few months. But ultimately, it just took me 2 decades to get into sustained remission. It's a lot of trial and error with doctors for some people. I know Caitlyn had luck kind of right away, but Manda took her some time and she finally got there. So definitely, if you can be your own advocate and really work on it, the time is worth it. Just finding that right doctor fit. So I did want to go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the area that you kind of just have to keep knowledgeable on anything that you are kind of hearing about, because there are studies looking into probiotics and gut health and what it can do. And of course, there is something about having a healthy diet. Of course, that can mean a different thing, especially with IBD. To Caitlyn's point, when I was flaring, I was supposed to be on a low fiber diet. And so hearing a dietitian tell you to only have half a cup of vegetables a day, and that was the maximum I could do, sounded so different than what you would typically hear with the nutrition table. There are some studies and there is some validation to looking into it. But at the same time, I'm going to admit there's a lot of people that are still kind of taking advantage of the holistic approach.
Mm-hmm. I have done some things in the past, meditation course, and I'm trying to get back to meditation on my own. Because I'm in remission, I think it's still important to work on, stress and things like that. I have done acupuncture in the past. I know there's not a lot of, I know there are studies around it, maybe not specifically with IBD, but that is expensive, and you do need to find what works for your insurance, and they're not always accepting some of these other things to try. Before we go to some of our final questions, I did want to pause to see if I missed any comments or anyone has anything. I think we're good. So I'd like to say, if you had some insights to share with someone that was just diagnosed and something you wish you knew a long time ago, what pieces of advice would you give?
I think the first being that you're not alone, especially depending on the type of community you're in. I've always been in a rural approach, so just knowing that you're not alone, there's other people you can talk to about it. It would be the first thing. A lot of people know the types of challenges that you're having that you can relate to and that they can talk with you about. Of course, that is really what got me into Girls with Guts, is being able to not only have the compassion and grace from other girls telling me it's okay, but also learning some wisdom from them. So I think another thing I'd probably do is try to suggest to them to find either support system or some type of mentorship or someone who has maybe lived some of that experience that they could learn from. Because, I mean, just in the treatment world alone, there are so many twists and turns, whether it is just, different types of mesalamine, or if you have to go the biologic route, or if a biologic isn't going to work, much less all the other complications, especially for Crohn's. Sometimes, and getting a second opinion, no matter what, even if you think that your doctor is on it, I would still suggest getting a second opinion.
Yes, that could never hurt, especially if there's confusion or you really still haven't gotten to the bottom of things. I always support getting a second opinion.
Yeah, and 100% you're not alone, although I do want to recognize that when you do get that initial diagnosis, it is overwhelming, and I totally relate to that. And I had those same feelings. And then have had 2 major flares since my own diagnosis, and it is overwhelming. So I just want to acknowledge that. But you're not alone, and it doesn't have to be this really scary diagnosis. I know that there's a lot of scary parts about it, and there's a lot of different layers, and some people end up in the hospital, and some people get surgery, and some people have no symptoms, and it's all over the map. But if you find a doctor that you like and you're comfortable with, and you find that support system. You do not have to go about it alone. And I know it's overwhelming too, to kind of go through all the resources and all the options. But I think things like Girls with Guts and Crohn's and Colitis Foundation are a really good place to start, because those people are experts in this specific area and they can help direct you. And even just sending a message, just like, I just got this, I don't even know what to ask, is a good place to start. Like, I've done that before. I don't know what to do or what I'm asking for. I just need help. And it's okay to reach out and ask for help. And you can do it anonymously a lot of the time. If you're not comfortable giving your name, like, you can just stay anonymous and just get the resources.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like that.
And I think you have a good point in emphasizing that it is overwhelming. I think we said earlier, it's okay that it's not okay. It's okay that it is overwhelming, because all of us have had those overwhelming moments. I had almost like a twofold of, first a UC diagnosis and then it being Crohn's. Obviously, they have similar weights, but yes, I think we've all have gone through that journey of it being overwhelming. And while I'm saying that you can relate to it, each person still has a specific battle and should be validated in that.
Yes. I feel like the support from others who understand is so immensely helpful, and something I resisted for a long time, because I know that every case of IBD is so different. I was always reluctant to connect with another patient because I might become afraid that, something is going to go wrong like it did for them, and maybe I would become more anxious. But what I've actually found is connecting with other patients has done the opposite. It's made me feel more secure and safe. A few years ago, after going through some complications with my colitis, my GI doctor at the time asked if I wanted to speak with someone who went through a similar amount of huge complications. And I was really afraid that I would see that it took over her life and she was in a really bad place. Instead, when I ended up talking to her on the phone, she had such a great demeanor. She was funny. She had kids, she had a family and a really cool job. And I learned all of the things that she had gone through. And to me, it was some of my worst fears with the disease, these kind of complications when it comes to abscesses and fistulas and all these sorts of things. And talking to her just gave me hope that you could go through these really low points of the disease and end up back in remission. And you could, do the things that are important to you in life, whether it is pursue a certain career or start a family. There are different things that you could still do, even if you go through some of the hardest bumps of this disease. So I just want to say that don't be afraid to connect with others, whether it's in person or online. Like I said, we just launched our Crohn's and Colitis group on the Mighty. So I'm really excited to see people join that. So I do hope to see you there. I do want to just throw back to Amanda and Caitlyn and see, is there anything regarding mental health that you wanted to touch on before we wrap this up and get final questions?
Yeah, I would say for me personally, in recent years, my last flare was right before I got married in 2018. So I would say since then, prior to that, I was really focused on educating myself in the physical management of my disease. So diet, exercise, all that. And then after this last flare that I think I just thought that I would be healthy and it was fine. And then I got into this flare that kind of knocked me on my butt before getting married, and I'm trying to plan a wedding, and it was just a lot. I really took a look at my mental health and my stress and like, where was I overextending myself? And I said earlier, I'm a recovering people pleaser, and I was just trying to help everybody else before myself. And I just had to stop. And, I think in some areas that did maybe cost me some relationships, but I feel so much better for it. And I think as I started doing that, that really helped me get back into remission, because I do carry all of my stress in my shoulders and in my gut. So I actually talked to a life coach, and she really reflected back to me that, you got this flare because you're trying to control everything, and your body's trying to tell you that you need to lose a little bit of that control. And so it's giving you this flare that's literally about losing control of your bowels. And that might be a little woo-woo for some people, but it really resonated with me. And I think addressing mental health and the depression and anxiety side of it. You know, I've dealt with depression and anxiety for a while, and it takes a lot for me to admit that. And it's something I've only very, very recently come to terms with and kind of dealt with. But that is totally tied to having a chronic illness and body image and the loss of friendships and strained relationships and the loss of ability to do things you love. It's all tied together. And so I think with whether it's IBD or whether it's chronic illness of another type or anything, mental health, like, to me, honestly, is at the top of the list, right next to like medication and nutrition.
Absolutely. I know my treatment over in Vanderbilt includes conversations not with only just a GI, but also a dietitian and a psychiatrist. I think they've even done studies where there's almost this cyclical tie to depression and IBD, where they've noticed a lot of patients, even before diagnosis, had some form of depression. And then, of course, too, when you're flaring, you're very susceptible to depression due to the activities that are going on. So I think it is absolutely crucial for someone to find mental health treatment as part of their holistic treatment to themselves dealing with IBD. You know, we have all had our journeys with mental health. Myself, I deal with OCD and some post-traumatic stress disorder, and they're not necessarily tied with IBD, but they were still stressors that likely could have been a part of what took me so long to get into remission. And finding that right person to talk to, because unfortunately, again, just like a doctor, you're going to have to find the right connection. And I hate to be the person to keep spurring someone to try to stay strong, because you're already strong for surviving IBD as it is. But trying to find that strength to find the right doctor, to find the right therapist, because it is out there and you can benefit so much from it.
I wholeheartedly agree with that, Manda. I am a huge proponent of therapy. If you are able to access it with your insurance, it could be very, very tricky. I know my colleague Renee Fabian, she recently did a fellowship studying the struggle with, therapy and access in certain states. But it is covered by some insurances, and it is worth the time putting into how could you treat your mental health like you do your physical health. So I would say, if you've never tried therapy before, if your insurance might cover it, and you're struggling with anxiety, depression, anything related to managing a chronic illness or anything of that sort, I'm a big proponent. And we have greetings from the Netherlands. Thank you for your help. Wanted to read that, shout out that comment.
And I just wanted to add to the therapy. I 100% agree, Angelica. I love therapy. I think personally every single person should be in therapy. But Psychology Today has a really good resource on their website. I just wanted to point that out, that you can search for a therapist according to your insurance coverage, according to what you're looking for to talk about, if you want a man or a woman, those types of things. So that's a good resource too.
Yes, thanks for shouting that out, because I've used that before. Awesome. Well, I'm going to see I'll give it just a minute or two to see if anyone has questions that we didn't cover, or just Caitlyn, Amanda, if there's anything, you've gone through the advice, you've gone through your own journeys that we didn't touch on today that you'd like to say. Otherwise, I know, Manda, you do have a virtual summit coming up with Girls with Guts, so maybe you could just chat about that as a further resource.
Oh, of course. Obviously, we talked a little bit about Girls with Guts earlier, but not this weekend, but the next. So October 2nd through the 4th will be a wonderful time. If you just want to see exactly kind of what Girls with Guts is about, we're having an entirely virtual summit that will include some speakers from even some IBD friendly yoga to Dr. Nandi, who is a very well-known GI in Philadelphia, along with some small groups where you'll be able to talk with girls on specific topics. We have like newly diagnosis group. We'll have a UC group, a Crohn's group, or even topics of your questions like IBD and parenthood, IBD with work. So we'll have a lot of information in that aspect, but also some fun too, like a little movie Netflix watch party on Saturday night. And it all is happening on Facebook. You really don't have to change that much to what you're doing. But you can definitely catch that on the Girls with Guts Facebook, along with the private forum. And I know too, we're going to be having a lot more activity in the Mighty's colitis and Crohn's group.
Yes. And I love that you have Dr. Nandi at the virtual summit, because
It's amazing.
just to reiterate, we are not GIs, we are not doctors, we are just people with lived experiences who have found ways to thrive despite our illness. So you could tune in with Dr. Nandi at the virtual summit for some actual medical voice. Also, let's see, did something come in? No, I did want to say on the Mighty, you could find me, I think it's like themighty.com/u/Angelica Joy with a little dash. So I'm on the Mighty. I'll be in the Crohn's and colitis group. I really hope to see you there. Oh, thank you so much. Got a comment saying that I love you three. I found your talk very helpful. I'm so happy to hear that. If even just one person could be helped by this chat, it is worth the time. So I'm so happy that you tuned in. You could always share this talk with someone that has IBD or any other chronic illness who didn't see it live. So it will still live on the Mighty's Facebook pages. Any last words, Caitlyn and Manda? Thank you again for joining today. I loved hearing your stories, and I look forward to working with you again.
Yeah, this was super fun. Thank you so much for having me. I guess one like parting thing I wanted to say was, I know that we talked about a lot of things today that are helpful, and it could probably still be overwhelming. And I just wanted to throw in a little lightheartedness. I'm a big proponent of making jokes about poop. So if people need a break from just kind of the heaviness of IBD, it's okay to make jokes if that's where you're at in your journey. I understand that initial diagnosis is not the appropriate time to joke about it, but once you're more comfortable in it, you do kind of have those moments where it can help to make, I don't want to say make light of it because it's not a light disease, but just have a little fun with it, because it's a chronic condition that you live with forever. So I find that sometimes when I am having rough days, like just kind of making light of those moments that you have, it actually helps me. So I don't know if anyone else feels that same way, but having a sense of humor can go a long way too.
Yes,
absolutely. And I think a lot of it even just goes to the right friends to do with it, because I mean, of course, I'm more than happy to get a cute little like poop emoji card from one of my girls, but I'm going to admit that I'm not ready to make jokes like that in front of like a childhood friend who hasn't gone through that. But so absolutely, whatever your safe place is, and that's the thing too. I know I'm kind of honing back to you're not alone, but there is a safe place for you. You can find it. It is possible. And once you find it, it is such a game changer to how you look at your disease and potentially how you treat your disease.
I think that's just a great note to end on. So I don't want to throw out any wisdom beyond that. That was beautifully said. So I will see you all on the Mighty in the Crohn's and colitis group. And Manda, I look forward to the virtual summit with Girls with Guts. And Caitlyn, thank you so much for bringing up the humor part, because I agree. I think you need to laugh at this disease at times. So have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.